what new directions do you see for criticism of the early modern period?
I think there are a variety of new directions. One direction that I've been interested in myself, and a piece of work that I did recently, was what I call agricultural materialism, which is a play on cultural materialism as championed and developed by Raymond Williams, but looking at something specific, looking at how husbandry in a colonial context, farming methods in a colonial context, agriculture in a colonial context was key to the advancement of empire. The colonies provided, if you like, a testing ground, a laboratory, a tabula rasa, a blank space, a field within which agriculturalists could experiment and innovate. And I think historically Ireland in the 16th century and the 17th century was one of those colonial spaces where agriculturalists were allowed to innovate and experiment and pioneer, and those pioneering farming methods moved from Ireland across to Virginia to the British colonial America. And I think so that's an interest of mine, where I'm looking at culture but in that broader sense, and one of its other meanings to cultivate, looking at agriculture. So that's one area of interest. I'm not the only person interested in husbandry or farming in the early modern period, and how that relates to pastoral poetry and to poetic imagery of land spaces and so on, land holdings and indeed of farming practices. So that's one area in which there's an interest. I think there's another area which might not be seen as a new direction, and that is empire, because what I've just been speaking about is interest in empire, but I think empire was really a driver behind so much human activity in the period, and affected so much human activity in the period, that I think we've not yet done it justice. We've not yet looked at the extent to which empire underpinned so much activity. One of the reasons for that is because Victorianists and modernists were much better at accounting for empire, at examining empire. So empire was always thought of as something that started later than the early modern period. Empire proper, as it might be called, was an 18th century phenomenon. The high point of empire was 19th century, and empire and Victorianism are kind of bound up together. So I think we're getting to a stage now where there's greater awareness of the pervasiveness of colonial concerns in the early modern period. So I think that's one of the shifts. And another area, of course, is something like medical humanities, or an interest in the sciences and medicine, and how a lot of these modern developments had their roots in the 16th and 17th century. You could add, of course, that they had their roots in the 16th and 17th century, often in colonial contexts, because again, the colonies were the sites of experimentation, and saw the development of, for example, battlefield surgery led to developments in medicine and surgery more general, but this was happening on the battlefield, which tended to be a bit, as it were, in the colonies. So I think developments in medicine and science and agriculture were bound up with empire, and I think interest now in those, the early development of the human sciences, if you like, is key to some of those new developments in the period.